OpenAI launched a mini version of their 4.0 model.
We kind of saw some of this during COVID and people thought, oh, wow, supply chain. And probably because they don't have a solution for meeting all of the EU requirements.
So I have to say, since we had the conversation about exponential growth, every day I get a new insight about, oh, this would be a really good way to explain it.
Aloha and welcome to the Daily AI Show. It's Friday and it's our wrap-up episode. Welcome everyone, and I'm Jyunmi and I am joined by Andy, even though he is traveling into, was it Spain? You're in Spain?
Yes,
right
now? I'm in Galicia, Spain.
All right. So our international show is more international. All right, everyone. Today is Friday, like I said, and it is our recap show. What did they just say about AI? And this is where we review, go over the last 2 weeks of stories and things that we want to further expand and get to things that we just didn't talk about in those last 2 weeks. Now, these stories can range from pretty much any topic that we talked about. And like I've said before, it's usually to all of the news I couldn't get to, and that's the kind of stuff I normally cover. So, hey, Justin's joined us in chat. Thank you, Justin. All right, so my first story that I wanted to cover that I didn't get to during the news cycle was a story that came out of the science realm, and it's titled "Ant Insights Lead to Robot Navigation Breakthrough." So this Delft University of Technology, they came up with a method to combine AI and using a method called odometry, which is the internal mechanism that ants and other insects use to help track their movements, right? And we know that insects can travel, quite a bit distance based on.
They follow the ascent trail.
Well, there's different animals do different things, but it's an internal mechanism where most insects will essentially count the number of steps that they take, right? And then they'll use some sort of method to take a snapshot of their surroundings. So this is sort of like computer vision in the sense that you take a snapshot of your current location, and then you use, combined with their internal mechanism of counting their steps, know how far they are from that snapshot. So that's essentially what the technology does, right? So the main benefit of this is because they do it in this method, it requires a very little power and very little memory, right? And that's the biggest things, and because they want to apply this to robotics, right? And so current robotics, you have to have a lot of power. You either have to be, you have to have power lined in and all the infrastructure that requires that, or you need to have batteries on the robots. And all the robots we've seen so far are, they're industrial robots, or they're humanoid shaped, or, they're Boston Dynamics robots, fairly large robots. So this technology is being developed for tiny robots, very small robots. And some of the suggestions that they are imagining for this use case is things like detecting gas leaks, getting into piping structure and things like that. And the best suggestion, I think, is for search and rescue, right? A lot of times when it's like a collapsed building or the structure just isn't safe for rescuers to go in, they can send in a robot. With smaller and smaller robots, the further and further they can go into the rubble, right? And make sure that they don't disturb, weight balances and things like that, so they don't cause another collapse. And so, by developing these very lightweight robots, they can help in that search and rescue project. Now, when we talk about tiny, we're talking about so memory-wise, their method is able to use 0.65 kilobytes of memory per 100 meters traveled. So 100 meters, that's like 300 something feet, right? And a kilobyte is 1,000th of a megabyte. So
that's a day-long march for an ant.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an incredibly small amount of memory. And so I think this is a super interesting way to get to combine those techs. So hopefully we'll get these lightweight robots made and tested out in real world. They were able to build one robot which came out to be 56 grams. This is how small the robot is, right? And 56 grams is like 2 AA batteries or like a large egg. That's how much mass is there. So these are very, very tiny robots.
But on the same theme of getting smaller and smaller, one of the things, hey, Brian, one of the things that came up this week is that OpenAI launched a mini version of their 4.0 model, one that's much lighter weight, lower power consumption, restricted to some degree in terms of its advanced reasoning capabilities, but very purpose-built for being able to manage smaller tasks, well-defined tasks. And that's a trend that we've been observing all along. Claude and that line of models also has Claude Haiku, which is the mini model. And so that's news, and everything's getting smaller at the same time as everything's getting bigger. So it's like this universal process.
How's it going, guys? How are you?
Hey, there he is. How you doing, Brian?
Good to see you. So I am our mutual friend from the AI Exchange, Pascal. I'm actually I'm using his stand-up desk right now in his workspace. He's got this very, very cool workspace called Station F, which is this converted train station in Paris, and very, very cool. So if he comes back by, I'll have him do a big swing. He was just taking pictures of the backstage so he could show the behind the scenes of us running our show. He's like, I'm very excited that I get to talk to the Daily AI show.
Let's marry.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I'm so glad you joined us, and what a cool connection to AIX, the AI Exchange, which is a community of AI enthusiasts and learners and developers, and that's where we all met in order to form the Daily AI Show. I wanted to shift to a subject that's very topical and timely, which is it spins off of a show that we did 2 weeks ago Thursday. And it's about American companies that you don't normally read about in the news. Well, one of the companies that's hitting the news very heavily right now is a company called CrowdStrike, because overnight they released a new version of their AI security software for securing cloud systems. And that, in an unfortunate interaction with Microsoft Windows services, crashed computers around the world, so that banks, airlines, other systems have been, failing all overnight and have only now recently come back online. That has caused CrowdStrike, this AI company that is very well regarded by analysts, to drop 10% on its stock price at the opening this morning. And so that's in the news. That they're going to get a lot of attention now. Negative for the moment, but it's really not related to their AI capabilities. It's related to a compatibility problem between their software and Microsoft Windows. That it's kind of hard to believe that wasn't found in early QA and testing, but it was a simple fix. They pushed the fix, And so it's over, but it was really disastrous for a number of travelers who were stopped because the systems running windows that show, what gate you're going to or where your baggage is being picked up, all of those failed at airports around the world. Not every airport, because they're not all using Microsoft systems, but where it was Microsoft and CrowdStrike, working together, then those systems failed.
It's a good reminder of how fast, people can be ground to a halt. We kind of saw some of this during COVID, and people thought, oh, wow, supply chain and how much that got affected. And then you see something like this where it's, these are the silent tech, companies that nobody thinks about until somebody brings them up on a news story and says, hey, CrowdStrike. Everybody goes, who? And they're like, well, that's the reason you can't get through LAX today or whatever the case is. So I'm very thankful that I was not traveling during that, because that would have been disastrous for sure. I know we were talking about, obviously we're talking about the shows over the last 2 weeks. I was a little late, obviously, joining here as I was getting set up. But I was thinking more about, like yesterday we were talking about, the power situation. And with being overseas, I'm in Paris, that's where Pascal is. And, looking at how other countries do it. I know we focused a lot yesterday. We talked a little bit, right, Jyunmi? But we focused a lot yesterday on like what the US can do. But I think it's worth just bringing it back really quick and talking about what other countries are doing, and, whether it be France and how they're approaching it. And we talked about this yesterday, right? As it's truly a decentralized, it needs to be decentralized solution that no one place is going to have the solution for everybody. And then I think it was Beth that was sharing stuff about Bill Gates and his philanthropic, work that he's been doing post Microsoft and stuff. And actually I was going to bring it up on the show yesterday. I didn't, but now I think I will, which is that, he talked about, let's talk about a problem in Africa of sewage, right? And human waste and things like that. And so you can go, well, I mean, what they really need is 1,000 toilets. Just buy them 1,000 toilets. And then of course you find out there's no infrastructure for 1,000 toilets. That would do nothing. They're just going to sit in a landfill somewhere. That might be the solution here, but clearly it's not going to be the solution there. They need on the ground people who are there living their day-to-day lives to figure out what's going to in fact work for them. And so I was just thinking about that today as I was sort of moving around the metro a little bit and taking trains here and there and other ways with my family, and just thinking every municipality, every city is going to have to figure out what effectively works for them, whether it's wind, solar, renewable energies, whether it's coal, whatever it is. So just wanted to bring that up because I felt like yesterday maybe we focused too much on the US, and of course the US is just one part, a big part, but one part of a much, much larger energy complex problem that we have to solve. So just wanted to bring that back around from yesterday's show as I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I think, we kind of touched upon the global impact and things like that. I saw an opportunity for regions to invest in those infrastructure things. So yeah, identifying what's going to work locally for your region. But my hope is that certain regions, if they have the investment into the infrastructure, then they could also be part of that decentralization, right? Providing power out to themselves, their neighbors, and eventually globally, because we do have this network, that's interconnected network, and we can output electricity as well, a draw from the grid and things like that.
I was going to run all the way back to the 1st of July, when, Jyunmi, you did a beautiful job talking about AI video repurposing. And that was a great show. And I wanted to do an anecdote here about who I'm visiting. I'm here in Galicia, Spain, and my wife and I have come over here to spend 5 days with some good friends of ours. One of whom is the director of social media production that services a number of agencies, right? So they have a whole pipeline of production, and they use AI. And of course, then I got into a quick discussion about what are the tools that you use, and I put forward that, if you were going to be repurposing long form video to short form clips to put them on TikTok or other social media, where you want a shorter version, you might use, for example, Opus Clips, which is the one that you came down with your recommendation on. And he said, oh yeah, we use that.
Good. I mean, they're already ahead of the game.
Opus Clip gets a lot of love. I think that, there's a reason that, Jyunmi, as you've really put these tools through the paces, and we really have, but you specifically for the show and figuring out what kind of, what's going to make it more efficient to run the show, especially as the show gets more complex as we grow, right? But I don't think it's any mistake that Opus Clip does continue to rise to the top for a lot of people. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that, Andy, that like other people are like, oh yeah, we use Opus Clip. I think it's not a name that has like universal recognition by any means, but if you know and you have that problem, you know that it's a decent tool.
And it's global too. We think, unfortunately, as Americans, although we have Canadians and Australians on our team, so to speak, we tend to think about what the market space is in our area. But of course, I'm in Europe now, and there's a whole economy over here across multiple languages. AI is serving them very well, and Opus Clips is one of them.
Well, I want to point out today, obviously, we're holding down 2/3 European right now with you and me, Andy, and Jyunmi is the only one, holding down the States at the moment. So we're very global.
I mean, eventually we'll all just be traveling constantly and no one will ever know where we are. We'll never be in the same place. We'll be a truly international nomadic show, right?
We will show up at your conference. We'll be on your stages. We'll be part of your talk tracks. Yeah, that's all coming in the future for sure, I think, as the show continues to grow. And that'll be super fun, I think, right, Jyunmi? And then that brings up a whole other host of problems, which is how do you do video editing on the fly? How do you do it when you have to do it out of a bag, or as I traveled to bring, way more equipment to make it look perfect, and 75% of it failed. So, well, right now I'm off my phone, but even back at where my normal location is in Paris, I've been just using, a Lumina camera, but I have my mic and I had everything else, and I've been having to run off the headphones and a small Microsoft Surface computer. Like everything else I couldn't get to work, and I dragged it all the way over here. So it just goes to show you, just bring the camera, bring a little ring light, call it a day. All this equipment. I can't even tell you how heavy the cantilevered mic stand that I brought that is absolutely useless. I should have learned my lesson and just gone super light. So
right. Okay. Well, let's. I do have a couple more things that I wanted to cover. And again, another science story. I just love my AI and science. All right. So the Department of Energy, their scientists from the National Laboratory had developed a AI method to create material fingerprints. Okay. So essentially in material sciences, and it's one of the fields that has been really accelerated and advanced by AI. And we've talked about this in the past, but AI seems to really have found its place in science to take care of the, or at least one of the steps in the mundane parts of science, right? As much as we love to see scientists in movies and TV, come up with the solution and solve the crisis, for the most part, science is boring, right? It is test after test after test. It's combinations of things, and it's like, oh, let's come up with this new one. All right, testing and testing and testing, and that's the vast majority of it. So in material science, because that's a large part, it sounds kind of mundane or boring, but AI can come up and identify new ways to either create new materials, identify different parts of materials. And one of those things is how materials change as they're stressed or relaxed, right? They're pulled apart or, let go. And you can see a lot of this in what, you might have heard the term stress testing, right? And stress testing is how much pressure can a material take? What happens if it's been under a lot of pressure and then that pressure releases? What's the kind of reaction to it? How does a material break down or age over time over those kinds of stresses? And so this new method combines an algorithm to recognize using an X-ray testing method, right, on a material to fingerprint a material. So a lot of times what will happen is the new thing that they've created is they've essentially created a neural network to recognize what these different materials are. And so the fingerprinting allows that, or this method allows them to identify where in like the life cycle and what has happened to these materials over time with this neural network and this X-ray tagging, essentially. And how does that apply to the everyday? Basically, a lot of AI in science is to decrease how long it takes to do things. So we're talking, again, with this method, they can identify the age and stress parameters of a material much, much quicker, And so this will help either one, creating new materials, or two, identifying when a material has reached its life cycle, so to speak, and should be replaced out and things like that, to make things overall safer in these other aspects. So not a definite correlation, but just improving material sciences across the board. That's my second science story. I got another one, unless someone else wants to chime in with something they want to take a look at.
No, I think that sounds super cool. I'd love to hear. You always bring really, really interesting science stories and stuff like that of what's going on with AI. So hit us with another one.
All righty. And then this one is a little closer to the heart, I guess. So the University of Exeter did a study where they found that AI is found to boost individual creativity at the expense of less varied content. Probably not a, mind-blowing realization, but now there is some hard science behind what they found. So what they, in their testing, while not extremely expansive, what they have found is that stories written with AI assistance have been deemed to be more creative, better written, and more enjoyable. All right. So this is from a test set of students doing these short 8-sentence micro stories, right? Just a couple of paragraphs, really. And the target was young adults, so new college students, those kinds of things. And a test set of 300 participants. So they took the work, or they took students who were creating what was considered less creative work, and they teamed them up with using AI to improve their work that they have written. And they found a 26.6% increase in what would be considered more creative or better work, better written, and a 15.2% increase in making it less boring. So more entertaining. So a 15% increase in it being entertaining. So, but what they also found is in writers who are more creative, their writing is considered more creative and more entertaining. They didn't get enough, or I should reword this. They didn't see the same kinds of increases, and that was a limitation of their test. But what they did find out is that all of the improvements that the AI was making also made it sound similar. So the work is better, but all of the work sounds more like each other, right?
So less creative variation.
Right.
It was better quality, but it doesn't sound like they really measured it on the creativity scale because there's not as wide a range of unexpected outcomes, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So essentially what it boiled down to was that, yes, the people who their writing wasn't as creative or their writing wasn't as good, their writing did get improved by the influence of having AI help their writing or improve their writing. It gave it a more professional polish to it, right? So probably improved more on the technical sides of things, some of the choices they made, and made it a little more entertaining and things like that. But all of their work collectively was less creative because it kind of all started to sound a little more like each other. So
we see this all the time. And so this is I think there's a definite connection to not just creative writing, but like in other areas where AI is being used. So definitely see this in sales. For sure. We see that, some of these AI solutions, the things that I've built, but not just me, other people as well, can very quickly take a D player to B pretty quickly, like within the day, right? You could, because you're helping that person, him or her, in sales, get up to that level, write better, copying these kind of things. But as you pointed out, what we definitely see as well is that if you're already A plus salesperson and you're rocking and rolling with copy and stuff like that, it's not that AI can't help. It's just not going to help to the extreme that it can help somebody move from D to B. And then the other side of what you were talking about, as far as like there being less diverse creativity, I guess maybe we could say it that way. I think that can be easily solved, because I think what's happening is people are getting creativity, but they're not putting it through any future filters, because people maybe don't realize that they can do that. So you can run it both ways. You might get better results. One way would be to run prompting first that says, I want you to adopt this style, this tone, this voice. It could be maybe somebody famous throughout history that the LLM has already trained on, or perhaps it's your own voice. And so you've already got a document that says, this is how I speak, talk, whatever. So you can train first and then run creative work through that. And what you should get is an elevated creative work that's in your style, tone, or voice. You can also try it the other way. And sometimes, the prompts work reverse. Sometimes they don't always work the same in both directions. So you could also try it the other way, where you try to have creative. So your output is basically going to be exactly what you said, which is generic, but creative, right? A better story, but also more likely that you would see that same style story with the same tone to it. And then you could apply a filter after that in prompts to try to get it to diverge. Where that might be more important is if you have, let's say, a company that has, let's say marketing is putting out a marketing calendar for content that they would like to get out. They're going to be at such and such conference. There's a new 4.0 release on such and such an app, whatever it might be. And so there's that content calendar. And now you want sales to know about that, right? So you might have a singular source of, like, let's say truth, run that through a creativity filter, run that through to get it to a certain point, which is the second option. And then filter off of that, but you go off of that like 3 or 4 or 5 different ways into different tones and voices that you might then want to use for some of your sales players, or to have different approaches to the same topic on something like LinkedIn. That would be a very smart way to do that. So I think there's easy solutions for this. I think it's just that my guess is, Jyunmi, like in these studies, they're just running it through the first thing and then addressing and evaluating that first sort of output, without saying, because it would be harder to test for sure if you're now throwing much more variables into it. But it seems to me to be an easy problem to solve, at least how I found it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, what popped out to me was that it was a scientific study that was talking about creative writing, which, I get to see a lot of those kinds of convergence. And I'd love to see that, like you pointed out, we've seen how it does in how AI can improve, like you said, from D to B in those business operations. But now we can see that same correlation between in the creative space. Oh, and Beth joined us. Hi, Beth. How you doing?
Hey, Beth.
Well, since Beth's just joined us, Beth, do you have a story or topic that you wanted to review from over the last 2 weeks?
So I have to say, since we had the conversation about exponential growth, every day I get a new insight about, oh, this would be a really good way to explain it. And recently I was thinking about what it's like to watch something grow, right? So exponential growth is a little like the baby that you take home and then it becomes a person. The first person it becomes, I don't know, you guys are two of your parents, I don't know, 2 weeks later, it starts to become more like, wow, you're nothing like what I took home. And then the next, right? And that whole series. And so looking at that and kind of saying what would it be like if you had heard that somebody had just had a baby, right? This is a baby. They're talking about a baby. They're talking about a baby. And you didn't meet them until they're 5, right? But you're thinking, but it's a baby. I've heard baby, maybe toddler, maybe 6 months, that kind of thing. But that's kind of an exponential growth thing. So that's really what it is that every day I wake up with oh, that's exponential growth.
I think you sort of nailed it. What I just thought of is exactly that. But what I would say, my spin on it would be, you talk to a 3-year-old, and if you're an adult and you talk to a 3-year-old, you go, hey, it wasn't the best conversation I ever had. I mean, it got distracted a lot. It repeated itself a lot. It asked a lot about cookies and where its stuffed toy was and stuff. And we really didn't get far. But I guess it was a conversation. We did talk about toys and stuff like that. And if you didn't talk to that 3-year-old again until it turned 7 or 8, you might be really, really shocked to find out that they have a whole vocabulary and they have knowledge and all this stuff. And that is kind of what's going on with ChatGPT. We keep saying, if you don't play around with it continuously, you will quickly find out that 3-year-old has become an 8-year-old, and that 8-year-old has become a high school graduate, and that high school graduate has quickly become a PhD scholar. And that's happening very, very fast, which is why you can't take your eye off of it, because so I love that analogy, Beth. That's a great way to put it. By the way, Beth, I want to make sure I tell you, and if he comes back by, I will bring him on camera. I know we don't do guests on the show, but if he's here, I'm actually using Pascal's computer and stand to hold this up right now. So he's here. If he's watching the show, he may come back around, and I'll introduce him really, really quick. But I told him, I said, I'm going to see Beth and Jyunmi and Andy and whoever, Carl, all that kind of stuff. And he was like, oh, it's the best.
Nice.
It's amazing.
Always good. And I told him, I said, you are the first person. He's coming this way. Maybe he'll come. I said, you're the first person I met from the AI exchange in person. And all I had to do was come to Paris to make that happen.
That's it.
He said,
that's the key. Just go to Paris, everybody. You can meet everybody you talk to online.
That's right. That's the way it works. Clearly. None of us have met each other. Have any of us? No, none of us have met each other.
Not physically. No.
Yeah. Unless there's secret meetings going on or something like that. Mutinies, and yeah. The real reason Andy's in Spain. We know. Okay. There's things happening.
Well, I want.
Andy's in Spain.
Oh, right. Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, of course.
I did want to highlight a couple of questions from our chat and our lovely viewers. So Justin had a question about has anyone tried 4.0 Mini yet? I haven't had a chance to try it. Has anyone? Okay, so Justin, expect that show probably in a week or two. We'll give first impressions of that. And then another question was. He asks, do you think Meta's decision to withhold Llama from the EU is reactive or indicates a bigger trend? Well, in most corporate decisions, large corporate decisions, my opinion anyways, is it's probably because they don't have a solution for meeting all of the EU requirements. That's probably it. It's we're not sure that we can answer these questions or cover our butts, so to speak, if there is a conflict. And that's usually my default. It's they probably don't have a solution, so they're just going to say no until they feel safe that they can, release it back into the wild.
Right. Because it does create its own kind of pressure. Right. And plus, Isn't Jan LeCun like there somewhere? Like, I mean, they had like Meta has a presence in the EU, an employee presence in the EU as well. Yeah. In terms of 4.0, I am interested in seeing what people are talking about it. Like, I like to like let the real tech bros do the deep dives and then read about them. One of the things that I have noted is that while it is significantly cheaper, it's not cheaper for images. So it's actually the same relatively high price for images. So while it is an image model, like it can experience and translate visual, that is not part of the, wow, this is so much cheaper and better and all of that. And
on another note, with respect to 4.0 Mini and the other minis out there, including Claude Haiku, that's a much smaller model than 4.0, but its reasoning capabilities and its sort of instruction following capabilities are equivalent to and maybe superior to ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, which not so long ago we were all going to. It was our go-to before 4.0 came out, really, because it was inexpensive relative to 4.0 and it was very competent. So now a 4.0 Mini in a much smaller footprint and much less expensive is already surpassing 3.5 Turbo.
Right. And the trend, there is a trend in releasing smaller and smaller models, right? So yes, people are chasing the frontier model and everyone wants to be the best frontier model, but there's more mini models being released right now than there are frontier models. And that starts to show a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's in response to the people saying that there's no ROI, right? It's too expensive to invest in, that kind of stuff. But I do think it is something to pay attention to for people who have that viewpoint, right? Like, this is much too expensive to invest in. There's not going to be enough ROI. I know Brian yesterday was like, nah, plenty of it. Definitely that's where it's trending. But also the models, the direction is that intelligence is going to be a negligible cost. So that's what you should plan for. And I feel like these mini models that are coming out, while they may not be quite as good as the premier frontier models, you can definitely see the direction that it's heading. Right.
Rachel Woods from the AI Exchange has said, expect the cost to go to near zero. She said that in a few of her LinkedIn posts, and that's a shocking statement as we sit today. But she's definitely one of the people that we all respect, and if she sees that, then I'm likely to respect that opinion and probably agree with her. So it's good. It's interesting to see. And look, I'm in France, so we have to give a shout out to Mistral, although they haven't been necessarily in the news, but they were one of the first really mini models that I remember seeing. I think it was 7XB or something like that, right? It was one of their first smaller models that was, people were demonstrating that they could run on a phone through, lots of hoops, but they could do it. There's just a lot of companies out there that are trending this way.
I'm glad you mentioned Mistral because it's in the news and on this subject, which is Mistral and Nvidia, which has its own internal AI software development team. They've collaborated using the Neo something or other. Somebody will remember the name of the Nvidia tool, but they've worked Mistral, champions of the Mistral 7XB, like smaller kind of mixture of experts models, and Nvidia work together, and they are delivering an enterprise grade inference engine that will work on a laptop. So put it in the company, don't worry about cloud-based inference. Their model is, they're saying it can do all of those tasks that you might want to do, easy things like summarization of a very long document, or not so easy for humans, but very easy for AI. So it's all this shrinkage is going to reduce the cost and also the footprint so that it'll fit on the system that you have right in front of you.
I think I think that's a solid point. That just real quick on that you're right, Andy, which is that, in a probably a not too distant future, this will just be what people consider part of an operating system, if they even call it that way. It's like, oh, I just buy a Microsoft, or I buy a Dell, or I buy an Apple, and it's X amount smart. And they probably won't even really talk about, oh, well, that's AI, or there's an LLM that's small enough and smart enough. And back in the day, that was so cost inefficient and big that it would never have worked. And now it's just like, like anything else that now can run on your phone that used to take a room full of computers to do. Everything is moving in that direction. So it's an interesting thought to think of it as like, it'll probably be thought less about as AI and just something that your computer does. It's just, why get more complicated? And then it's like, oh, this computer's
another layer. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let me just, if there's any other stories or any other points that you guys want to cover before we wrap up here, go ahead. All right, cool. Then thanks everybody for joining us. This was always a fun episode. Next week, we've got a number of fantastic shows for you, of course, including the news, and we'll do our latest tool review, which Carl will be leading up, and you'll get our first impressions, which is an AI-based floor plan rendering application and things like that. So can take your CAD and architecture designs from a drawing all the way to a full 3D render. So I think that should be super interesting. So please join us next week. Remember to check out thedailyAIshow.com for all the latest episodes, signing up for the newsletter, and that'll be coming out. Our latest issue will be coming out Sunday. So please sign up and keep an eye out for that. Other than that, everybody enjoy your weekend. Bye. Aloha.